Welcome back to Man Across New Horizons. I'm dear darling, and shall we see what's going on our lovely island of Fawnhollow today, where hopefully it's nothing particularly important because Mira has moved out yesterday, and today we'll be doing a lot of island hopping, trying to find a new villager to replace that hole in the heart that she left behind. But of course we're wishing her well, and hopefully she'll have greater things waiting for her ahead of her. So yeah, that's basically what we'll be doing. The exception will be if Crazy Red is visiting in town for today, in which case we'll just quickly check out what paintings he's got, and then we'll move on swiftly. I don't think any other guest is particularly important. Oh, sorry. Welcome back to something. Today is Thursday, the 19th of August 2021, and it's 3:32 PM. No news to report today. Have yourself a wonderful Thursday, or so I like to call it Friday Eve. I forgot how I spell start to thing. I know she says the date and time below. I can't remember exactly how the speech goes, which is kind of wild because I've said it so many times in a row. You would have thought it'd be kind of stuck in my memory, but alas, it's not, because the only important parts of it I remember is says date, says time. Hello, Audie. Guess what, Babu? So you know you're crazy. Why are you a huge dancing beetle? We've had this one before, so it seems like we'll get straight onto it. We've got our tickets raring to go, and we will just go island hopping. So yeah, what do I want to talk about today? I don't really know. Normally when we do these island hopping things, I end up talking about like video game, like design things and stuff like that, because that's things I suppose I feel like I have opinions about. I feel like I have some say in it, not like a huge amount, but of course everything I say is definitely, you shouldn't probably scrutinise it all that much, because I'm sort of just like randomly filling in, and it's not really my most well thought through and expressed opinions necessarily. But I normally just talk about random stuff anyway, so just talking about video games and that sort of thing. Because yesterday I watched a video by, you might know the YouTuber called JoeCat. He does a lot of, previously he did a lot of like, maybe he started as D&D like animation things. You might know him for a very SS guide to X class in D&D, and he expresses the class in a sort of comedic but also sort of educational way as well. I think it's a good way for like, I'm not an expert in D&D, mind you. I just like it a lot conceptually. I just want to play some, and have played a couple of campaigns in the past. But I feel like he does a good way. He's a light-hearted way of expressing basically the core concepts of what a character does, which I think is very useful. You are like Rhonda or something. We see you so much. You might actually be the villager we see the most on island hopping. I swear. How many times I've seen you. And yeah, he's done all the classes, and he's done all the races at some point. Not, well, he made like a big like rap video about races. They're very good. Go check him out. I'd say if you're interested in that sort of thing, but even if you're not interested in that sort of thing, maybe check them out anyway. Maybe not your cup of tea, but I think they're very amusing videos, to say the least. But recently he's done some on Final Fantasy. Is it 15 or 14? 15, right? Hold on, 14, 15. Final. I can't. What is going on? Oh, I did Control Shift, and I keep failing because in Firefox incognito mode is Control Shift P. Final Fantasy. Is it 15? It is 15, right? I mean, it comes up with something. Wait a minute. This isn't the MMORPG. Maybe it is 14. Final Fantasy. Oh, okay, it's Final Fantasy 14 on there. My bad. Which is actually probably like, I'm not going to say it's the most popular MMORPG right now. I guess Valve probably still holds that title, but from what I understand, a lot of people are sort of getting rather disillusioned with WoW, and a lot of the long-time players are basically like, I'm stopping playing. And recently there's been a resurgence, not resurgence, a big surge in people like fleeing is probably the wrong word, but moving ship over to Final Fantasy 14. Big, and that's fair enough. I've heard a lot of good things about Final Fantasy 14. Never played it though. It's still a subscription based. It might have a free-to-play account, but nowadays I don't have the time really to invest into MMORPG, and I don't even know who you are. Marcy? I'm not even sure if I've ever seen you before, but you're wearing a heart apron, so I've got to give you props to that. Yeah, it's a game I hear a lot about, and it's one of those MMORPGs which I think have withstood the test of time, along with, I suppose, Eve. Guild Wars, I think, is still doing okay. Not like WildStar, rest in peace WildStar, and Grand Fantasia, which is very much probably dead. I think Maple Story's maybe doing okay, or at least some revived version. I don't know, Milky always plays it. I basically have no idea. But anyway, Final Fantasy 14 is probably, if it's not on track to be, probably is soon to be the most popular MMORPG in this current generation. I'm not going to include past generations because WoW will always have that crown. And this game I've mildly been interested in, and he, not recently, like a couple, maybe it's months ago or something, he released a video about playing a tank role in that class, and now he's done one about playing a healer role in a class. And that one, of course, appeals more to me because whenever I used to play MMORPGs, I like to play healers, I like to play supports and most sort of things, because most other people like to do damage and the power fantasies and that sort of thing. My power fantasies, I suppose, is letting people do that sort of damage, you know. I always give the League of Legends analogy of why I like Yuumi so much. Is like, I don't want to be that person getting a pentakill, I want to be that Yuumi sitting on that person getting a pentakill and allowing them to do it. That sort of thing. So yeah, that was interesting to see. Final Fantasy looks a bit different actually from what I've seen other MMORPGs do for the healer classes. The fact that it's actually quite incentivized for the healer to be able to output quite a bit of damage himself, because from what I could tell from what the comments said explaining it is in Final Fantasy, how the damage works is the damage over time from a boss is actually not negligible, but like not that meaningful, I suppose. So rather than in previous MMORPGs where basically as a healer you just sit there pressing the heal button on the tank over and over again, sometimes casting your AoE heal if like too many ads come out, and or like some sort of poison dot. At least that's my experience with Grand Fantasia, which didn't really have the most interactive of boss fights, to be fair. And sometimes cleansing the odd debuff or here and there. In Final Fantasy, it seems basically what you're doing as a healer is basically DPSing most of the time, but most of a boss's DPS damage comes from the ones which could wipe your party, other ones where they just do huge burst damage. So what happens is you get in the stage of doing, you know, continuous damage as a healer, and then it's Alfonso, that's his name. I had to think about it. Right, doing continuous damage to the rest of the party, topping them up like ever so slightly and that sort of thing, and then the boss will do like big burst damage, and that's when the healer comes in with either their preventative damage with shields and that sort of thing, or they top up heal people afterwards and that sort of thing. I said that sort of thing twice to prevent the party from wiping, and I think that's an interesting spin on that sort of things, because it's a fatal flaw, I suppose, from a lot of the different MMORPGs. Not many people like to play healers, not many people clicked the wrong button, like to play tanks. Especially when I was younger, I always liked playing healer, and now I'm gone older, I also like playing tanks as well, I think. Perhaps it's just like, I feel like those fit what I'm looking for, like a party dynamic, much more than playing a DPS necessarily does. I find actually DPS is kind of boring. And if you love DPSs, by all means, more power to you. But you know, it's just like what I like to play for is I like to, I suppose, feel like I'm that directly contribution to a party and that sort of thing. So yeah, I used to play healer back when I played Grand Fantasia and that sort of thing. Had a sage class, had a cleric class, which became a prophet. I can't remember. And I had like a second character which was like a paladin, I believe. I don't really remember. It's a bit vague in my memory now. I don't even know who you are, but we're just gonna leave. Well, that sort of thing. Oh yeah, did I say who we're looking for? We're looking for only two villages now. We're looking for Fauna and Phoebe. Those are the only two villages we're missing for my top 10, I suppose, favourite villagers. So, you know, the fact that we've even got this close is astonishing in the first place. Yeah, but watching that video sort of made me really think about a video. I can't remember who made it. I think probably many people have made it, but it was basically talking about the trifecta of the DPS, the tank, the healer, or, you know, offense, defense, utility or something in games, and how it crops up everywhere, and, you know, the benefits and deficits of it. Like, the benefit sides is like, it's been well established in video game systems for now, so people know what to expect. A lot of people have these favorites. People are like, and by using these sort of broad labels and divisions of class, especially in MMORPG, but also can apply to, you know, things like shooters and MOBAs, it makes people be able to understand very quickly like what sort of groups of classes and characters they would enjoy playing. So it's like me, you know, I'm like, oh, I like to play support, and if I wanted to start playing Final Fantasy 14, I'd be like, oh, instead of just having all the classes and having to read every single one, being like, oh, which one individually does what. Eric, you don't recognise us though, do you? I think Eric moved to Benedict's Island? I can't remember. It's really sad they don't recognise us, but, you know, I got to realise that's a different Eric. But yeah, me as a support player who likes playing support classes, if I could Final Fantasy 14, I'd be like, oh, instead of being overwhelmed by the other classes and like potentially being put off or like paralysis analysis, being like, which class should I play? I can now look, oh, you know, these are the support classes, the White Mage, the Scholar, and Astrologist, and I can choose which one I can read into, seeing which one fits my playstyle more. As I understand, the White Mage is all about big heals, and then Scholar and Astrologist about shielding, with an Astrologist more being buff based and the Scholar being, I don't know, it's got a pet fairy or something. Either way, if I was more interested in playing it, which I kind of am, but you know, it's a time balance if anything, I can look into just 3 classes a bit more and work out from there which of those suits my style best, or maybe, you know, just make a load of different characters for each of those classes or something like that. I don't know. Either way, that's where a lot of the interest can lie. Yeah, that goes for a lot of things, like, you know, if I'm playing Overwatch or something, be like, I like playing support characters, oh, you know, who should I play? Maybe I try Mercy, oh, but then maybe I could try Zenyatta, I can try Maria, I can try, well, Symmetra used to be classified as utility, I think she's defense now. All these sorts of classes, and just be like, you know, which of these suit my fancy? And if anything, it's sort of like, it's good in a sense, because when I play these sort of games, I want to be utility. Oh, you are Francine, I think. You're Francine or her sister. I can't remember what her sister's called. Chrissy, maybe. And I don't. Oh, now I think about. I think she's Chrissy, and Francine's the blue one, maybe. Because when I play these sort of games, I want to have supportive and utility capabilities. But I'd like to always branch out a little bit. Like, I'm going to use Overwatch as an example from just being the plain healer. You know, over in, like, just like the binary, like, Medigun style healer, like the medic from TF2. Because in TF2, the support classes, but it's kind of just a medic kind of engineer if you look at it from a healing perspective. What they have more is like offense, quote quote, defense, quote quote, and utility, although the line's a bit more blurred now compared to the meta as I suppose Valve envisioned it when they first created the game. But I like to have a bit of variety between the different players, and you know, one of them, you know, maybe I do want to just play a basic healer like Mercy. I just want to top people up and sometimes give them a damage boost and that sort of thing, and that being thematic. But sometimes, you know, you want to change things up, or you know, you need something different from just playing that same healer and over and over again. Be like, you know, that I can choose Zenyatta, you know, and you know, I've got the special ability. I've still got some heals, but my heals maybe aren't as strong. That's Sylvia, I think, and for trading that, I have an ability now which marks people, which now makes them weaker and more susceptible to damage, and I've got a decent amount of damage myself. Yeah, so I suppose by dividing your characters, I suppose, into these sort of the trifecta of DPS, tank, and supportish roles, it allows, especially the tankish and supportish roles, to diversify more in their sort of playstyles, rather than being like having a whole, like, you know, 20 characters and 2 of them heal basically the same sort of way. Now you have like, oh, now about a third, or maybe less than a third, I suppose, if we're being right, like 6 of these characters that are devoted to being supportive in some way, and they all heal in different ways, and they can find their different niches in this aspect, which I think is nice. I think it sort of incentivizes the devs to develop in that sort of way, and actually focus on these sort of roles, because they end up being very important, as you can see from the medic being probably the most important class in TFT. And there being only one healer role, basically. Like, now all the onus lays on medic, rather than in Overwatch where it's like, oh, we need a healer, maybe we could use Mercy, why don't we choose Lucio, because now we can use the utility of his movement speed at sacrifice of the burst healing and that sort of thing, or I don't know, whatever else was like Baptiste. I can't really remember what Baptiste does, because he was released after I started playing. Is that Marina? That's Marina. Yeah, and you know, same for tanks. And I suppose DPS takes a hit, but there's so many different ways to do DPS in the first place. I feel like the DPS variety should already be there. IMO. But yeah, the downside is it's a very binary system, isn't it? You know, there's an expectation, which I think is reflected, especially in how, especially like queue times and pickup groups, how they work in MMORPGs. You have to have a tank, you have to have a healer, and you know, everyone else. You have to have as many as you need, as many tanks and healers as you need to be able to pass the dungeon, when everyone else just gets filled in being DPS or whatever the sort. And especially because everything is so clearly divided into these roles, even though they have different mechanics of fulfilling those roles, it can feel a bit samey, isn't it? You know, as a healer, you know, I'm here to make sure everyone doesn't die. Nor whether I do that from healing, or whether I do that from preventative damage with like shields and that sort of thing, or whether I do it by having crazy buffs so we can end the instance fast enough or something like that. It all can feel kind of samey because I'm pigeonholed into the role of being support, and it's sort of in some ways, like, while it can breed creativity, because restriction can breed creativity, you're not Ali, you're like Gale or something. It like restricts creativity as well, because now there's not really much sort of like weird roles and things you can have in a team, I suppose, especially with MMORPGs where you can do something crazy. Instead, they have to fit in one of these 3 roles, especially because now the pickup group, like, the way the pickup groups work is you have to queue up in one of these 3 roles, and you have to fulfill one of them, because that's how paramount they are, I suppose, to actually clearing these dungeons in the first place. Now, is that a problem in the first place? Your mileage may vary. Maybe you'll be like, yeah, it is a problem. I want some more innovation, I suppose, when it comes to these sort of things. I'm tired of having the same tank, healer, DPS formula over and over again, fulfilling the same sort of roles and having very translatable skills, I suppose, from one game to another, just with a different skin and different execution. Now, I think that's a bit of a simplification, because the games tend to have very different mechanics in the first place, even if they have the same core roles intact. To say that the skills would be transferable, yeah, I think the understanding would be transferable, but not necessarily the skills. But perhaps I'm not really an expert in the MMORPG genre, so perhaps that's not sort of the place for me to say it. But there's something definitely transferable there, something which, you know, I'm not sure if it's a good or bad thing, where when you play a game, you're just like, oh, you know, this is, oh, you're Ali. When you play a game, you'd be like, oh, there's too many parallels now, being like, oh, you know, every time you see an ability, unless it's exceedingly unique, you can just draw upon another ability from a similar game you played. Be like, oh, this is like X and X skill in WoW, or this is like, oh, X and Y skill in Guild Wars or something. They just sort of get weirdly mixed together. And that means that a lot of, well, I'm not sure if it does mean, but it could mean that a lot of the appeal from a game now is solely relying on necessarily the story and the lore and the world they build around, which is cool. But I feel like there's always room to diversify in that sort of aspect. And I feel like the easiest way for most games to diversify is not by breaking that sort of holy trinity of classes, is by diversifying the mechanics they use for it. You know, like, WoW, they have a classic and clicking. Well, I don't really know how to encapsulate WoW gameplay, I suppose, but, you know, it's very different from something like, as example, WildStars, that old MMORPG, which I thought was super different when I played it. It was basically like sort of playing I'm not sure how to, like, an action RPG, I suppose, instead of an MMORPG. You know, it felt very dynamic, that sort of thing. Very tiring, I must say. But, you know, of course, I didn't really pay off, but that's kind of because WildStar was just horribly mismanaged in every which way possible. There's a really good Death of the Game or something. I can't remember what that channel's called. Video about WildStar. Absolutely give that a watch if you're interested in that sort of thing. Perhaps only I'm interested in it because I remember when WildStar was first teased and I was like, this looks awesome. And then, you know, oh, it's a payment and subscription based. Wow. As me being like a 14-year-old or 15-year-old when it first came out, can't really afford to do that. Oh, they went free to play 4 years later. Oh, there's like no one here. And none of my friends want to play anymore because we're no longer hyped about this. And I don't even want to play anymore, but I still played it for a little bit. Yeah, they diversify using those sort of systems, but it still has the holy trinity of tank class, DPS class, healer class, with the slight exception that I think some of them could, like, off-roll into other classes. Like, you could choose what would be the healer class, but you could build a healer as a DPS. But in those sort of aspects, it's just like, why would you do that when you could just build a DPS instead? Like, I suppose it's just the thing that, why would it be cool to have people who can, like, off-class or, like, fulfill multiple roles? It'd be like, oh, what if we had a tank who also did DPS? Like, they sacrificed some of their tanking abilities to do DPS abilities. Or if we had a healer who could also do DPS? Or if we had a healer who could off-tank as well? You know, those sort of, mix roles, off roles sound really interesting. Or if we had, like, a jack of all trades could fulfill any role. Maybe that's, you are Alice, I believe, who could fulfill any role in a party, just maybe not as well as a dedicated one. Yeah, why would we do that when we could just use a dedicated person instead? And therein lies the nature of, like, matchmaking problem. Like, I'll go an example in Grand Fantasia. There's a Sage class who was the first one I played. They could be a DPS, like, assassin style. They could be a tank, or they could be a mage DPS caster, or they could be just a regular old healer, I suppose. In their human form, they could basically change animal forms and have different ones unlocked. The problem is then, now, as that class, if you want to be that sort of jack of all trades, you now have to have 4 different builds for each of those things. You have to have 4 different weapons. So now your costs are now exceedingly high because of the way that MMORPGs are built around the grind. You know, you have to grind out 4 different, like, accessory sets and armor sets. You had to grind out 4 different weapons and craft all 4 different weapons. You had to buy 4 different sets of talents and master talents and like specs and 4 different like sets of abilities and upgrades, and they're so expensive and that sort of thing. Well, like when it comes to being like in a pickup group or that sort of thing, it doesn't really matter, does it? Like, why would we choose you, Sage, as a sort of like a 7 out of 10 DPS when we could choose, you know, like I can't remember what the best DPS class was back then. Let me think. Hold on. Was it a wizard? That's best magic DPS. Maybe it was an assassin? I can't remember. That doesn't sound right. Maybe it was a ranger. It's like, why would we choose you when we could choose an assassin or a ranger who's like a 9 out of 10 or a 10 out of 10 DPS class? We'd be like, okay, well I can heal sometimes. Yeah, but we already got like a 10 out of 10 cleric healer on our team already. We don't need you. Like, it's not useful, I suppose, in a lot of these dungeons to be able to be that style. It's only useful outside of dungeons, which is the problem. Like, so I'm sure it was great, I suppose, when I was running around like grinding things, because I played a dedicated healer and I played that mixed sort of healer. It was great as playing that mixed healer around the overworld, being like, oh, now I actually have a damage to kill things, and I can also top myself up at all the times. I could solo bosses quite, and like mini bosses, I suppose, reasonably easily, because I could just like heal tank for everything while I was playing my healer class. I'm like, my damage options are limited, but I'll just never die, I suppose, out here, and sometimes I can heal people that come by him and maybe might help me and do things like that in repayment. But the other problem, yeah, so it's great in the overworld, but then when it comes to like actually doing dungeons and that sort of thing, it's like, oh, you know, but there's no benefit for me like switching from, well, I shouldn't say there is no, hello, Alfonso again. I shouldn't say there is no benefit, but at least in that game, because the designers didn't design around it, there's no need for a character to be like, oh, you know, I'm going to DPS on this boss, but this next boss we need more healers, so I'll switch to a healer. This next boss I need to be a tank, like an off tank, so I'll switch to my tank form, that sort of thing. I'd imagine other games do that better in Grand Fantasia, which is fair, because Grand Fantasia was not well designed. It was just the first RPG I played, or one of the first. I think Wednesday was the first one I played, which is basically some sort of MapleStory clone. But yeah, that's what I want to see. I mean, maybe you might be like, that's the fault of the game. That's not the fault of the holy trifecta of classes. It's more like, to break the holy trifecta of classes, the design needs to take into account that the holy trifecta is not always what you want. So, like, maybe if the bosses are designed in such a way, but dungeons are designed in such a way, but the first boss you need like 2 healers. Like in a party of 5, you need like your 1 tank, 2 DPS, and 2 healers. But then the next one, because it's a race against time, you only need 1 tank, 3 DPS, and 1 healer who is off DPS and that sort of thing. The damage they do maybe isn't that big, but like if it takes too long, then they just like enter some sort of berserk mode, which wipes the entire party. Like, I don't know. I'm just throwing this out there. Would it be fun? I don't know, because then I suppose that goes in the other issue that if you don't have enough like flex classes, I can't remember what that person's name is, like Pietro or something. If you don't have enough flex classes, and it's just like, oh, it just fills in the other problem rather than needing a dedicated healer. Now we needed a dedicated flex person. But I feel like that could be interesting. At least if it's interesting in the sense that now, instead of having just like a holy trifecta, we now have like the trifecta plus a 4th flex roll, which can sort of like bounce around between the 3 corners of a triangle whenever it wants. But it doesn't do any of them nearly as well, so it's more like a restricted triangle. I guess that could be interesting. I don't know if any games actually do that, but I assume they do. But that's why when I was watching this video about Final Fantasy 14, I was like, oh, it's pretty interesting how healers are expected to DPS. They're not expected to be like crazy DPSs, and now DPS are DPSs, otherwise everyone would just be a healer, wouldn't they? But they're expected to contribute as well, because as I understand it, you know, they don't need to be healing all the time if the boss's like damage over time is not that strong. But and also it's not advisable to keep everyone topped up to full health all the time, because that's like a waste of mana, because you're expected to use your mana as well on DPS abilities to help crush the bosses as well, because so they can't like enter some sort of berserk mode if the fight goes on too long. Everything, I know your name, it's like Stu or something. Yeah, I'm not sure if there really is a reason, I suppose, to break the Holy Trinity in the first place, especially for like big AAA mainstream titles of that sort of thing. Things which have broad appeal to lots of people. The fact that the Holy Trinity exists, I think, exists as a good sort of effective communication tool, I suppose, for people to be like, hey, you know, I just want to know a bit about your game. I want to play tank. Which classes should I play? Easy done. Point to these classes. This is what you can do. I think it's a good way of communicating that way. And I suppose one of the difficulty, especially for doing these dungeons and that sort of thing, is if you don't have this holy trifecta, it becomes very difficult for random public, public pickup groups to organise themselves, I suppose, into the dungeon meta. Like, this is why we settle into a meta, so everyone has like an agreed, established playstyle, and everyone knows what they're doing, and then you basically have a team plan formed. It's like, for examples, in early days of League of Legends, the meta was all over the place, people were doing whatever they want, like running double tank bot lanes, the ranged carry went mid, and that sort of thing. But now it's settled into very, very concrete roles of having top laner, a jungle, a mid who's whatever, and an AD carry, or a range carry usually, and a support in the bot lane. Even if I do try and break that sort of thing, the convention's very there, set in stone, in the plays. So at first I remember in early seasons they tried to break it and they tried to push things away from it and try to encourage other different playstyles. Like there's this conception of like a double jungle going on for a while, or like a dedicated roamer and a jungler, or that sort of thing, or like not having a jungler, I can't really remember. They experimented it very early on, but you know, like if you go into a ranked game and everyone's expecting to play the standard meta and you're being like, hey, I only know how to play this other weird meta, you know, you're the problem there, the team, you know. Everyone else is like, okay, we know how to play this, we don't know how to play around you, and you're just here being like, I don't know how to play with you, you know. You're going to be a problem, you're not going to do so well in these sort of ranked games, which is why people establish a meta and tend to stick with meta. I'm not sure if that's actually true, that's sort of like, again, I was going to say preface is more of a postface. This is just like random preamble, or like ambling, and I feel that I hate you in Wild World. I don't actually know if this is why it happens, but people are just very like, they're like having some sort of idea of what they're doing, I suppose. As good it would be to be like, oh, just go into any sort of pre-made rank game in League of Legends, be like, oh, you know, this time we're just going to run this wacko team comp or whatever, completely just like off kilter. But you know, the problem is, if everyone's randoms, and you're not playing with like a pre-made 5, no one's going to know how to play that for the weird meta that you've invented. And it's the same thing with MMORPGs, you know, like if you come in with an idea, like maybe if you played with a pre-made 5 and you know how to run 5 tanks, no healers or something, as or like 5 of you are playing one class instead of whatever other compositions, you know, fair enough. But if you're going into random pickup groups, people are going to be like, what the heck are you doing? Essentially, which is why, like, you know, eventually I'd imagine all the developers of a game like cave into those systems in the end, which is why, you know, League of Legends, it didn't always have like queuing for position roles. You just queued whatever, and you just tried to select your positions, but I guess because they were trying not to pigeonhole people, and then until it got well too deeply established, that's now the meta. I don't remember your name, but I've seen you before. And it happened with Overwatch as well, because I remember the early days of Overwatch, you could have like an unlimited amount of characters on each team, of each like champion on each team, and also like you can run like 6 tanks you want, you can run 6 healers if you wanted to, that's something. But now, like when you queue up for games, even in quick, I'm not even they might still have a mode where you don't have to, but in the other modes it's like, you know, you have to have either queue up as being a tank or a DPS or a healer, and you have to have 2 tanks, 2 DPS, 2 healer every single time. Because I assume that's just what, I don't know because I haven't followed Overwatch, but I assume that's just what the Overwatch meta settled into. And you know, the devs of that team were just like, okay, we might as well just embrace it and make it easy for everyone, rather than trying to reject it necessarily. So yeah, but Trifecta is probably here to stay in the sort of general populace wide appeal, but it'd be nice to see it's sort of being broken up a bit, I suppose, in more indie games, and it probably has been. I'm not aware of it, because, you know, indie and MMORPG kind of go against each other, right? How do you have an indie MMORPG? How do you, as an indie game, you'd have to be extraordinarily lucky to get an explosive amount of players playing your indie MMORPG in the first place to even get the player base sustaining for what the mass multiplayer part of it is meant to be, you know? It's difficult. Which is probably why there's not as much variation, and that's why the variation happens within that triangle rather than trying to break out of the triangle or change the shape of it in the first place. So yeah, but I guess those are my thoughts on the Holy Trinity, or whatever, video game Trinity, MMORPG Trinity. I'm going to watch those videos again and see if I still exactly agree with what they say. Maybe I don't know. But yeah, we got one last island hop. Hopefully we haven't run into any of the villages that we particularly wanted, because if we have, I have not been paying attention. I've just been talking the entire time instead. But I don't believe we have. So we will just, you know, see what's last villager. If it's not Fauna, if it's not Phoebe, then so be it. I might do a little bit of island hopping outside or video, and then we'll see how that goes. But presumably that just means we're going to get a random villager moving in tomorrow. Because that do just be how it goes. If you don't find someone, then someone random will just move in the end. And then you'll just be like, ah. New friends. You thought I was going to say something disparaging and be like, oh, what if it's, I don't know, Graham. What's your name? Curly. I don't think I would have remembered, to be honest, but I have seen you before. Okay, well, yeah, I don't know. The fact that I actually talked to half an hour and I have, like, no recollection of, like, the time passing, I suppose, is actually crazy. I'm hesitant to say it's a problem with games, because I don't think it is a problem. I just think it's an interesting sort of thing which is happening, and when it gets broken, it sort of deserves that undue attention that it gets. But I don't know if any MMORPGs really sort of break that without, you know, the system being entirely different in the first place. Like, you know, I guess you could say Eve doesn't have that sort of holy trinity, which is, like, fair enough. But maybe it does, I don't know. But anyway, should we round this episode off here then? So if you have been watching, thank you very much. It's been Animal Crossing New Horizons. I've been Dear Darling. Likes, comments, subscription, shares are greatly appreciated. Join me Dear Darling Discord. Follow me on Twitter down below. Hope we can see each other again. But for now, it's our farewell. So until next time, bye bye for now.